Welcome to today's Tuesday talk on stakeholder engagement versus social distancing. How do the corona restrictions affect participatory research in the European Union energy and marine research projects by Diana Süsser and Vera Köpsel? Diana joined the IASS last year in our energy transition dynamics team and focuses on socio-political technological transitions, energy policy model interactions, and innovations for sustainable energy transitions. Her disciplinary background is in social science and geography, and prior to joining the institute, she worked among others at the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the University of Hamburg, and the Israel Public Policy Institute. And we have a second speaker today, Vera Köpsel. Vera is currently working at the Institute for Marine Ecosystem and Fishery Sciences at the University of Hamburg here in Germany. She's working in particular on long-term predictability of fish stocks across Europe and sustainable fishing in the context of the Pandora and the Future Maris projects. In these projects, she's responsible for stakeholder engagement, outreach, and communication. And her disciplinary background is in human geography. Before we now start, please keep in mind that this session will be recorded. And now, Diana, Vera, please, the digital floor is yours.
Thank you, Achim.
Yes, thanks a lot for the introduction. Yeah, warm welcome again from our side. I'm very happy that Vera Köpsel is today here with you, because actually the research we're going to present to you today is really, or originated really from the both of us. So as you might have figured out, Vera and I know each other still from the University of Hamburg, where we did basically our PhD around the same time. And from there, we actually went in thematic different directions. As Arim said, I work now more in the energy field and Vera in the fisheries and marine science field. But what really combines still our both research field is really the stakeholder engagement. So we are both responsible for the stakeholder engagement in our EU research projects we are working in. And that was actually also the starting point for this research, really to look closer how the current corona restrictions affect participatory research in EU energy and marine science research projects. Yes, so briefly just to the background, I mean, we all know that COVID had really severe impacts on the societies around the world, and also the scientific community, as we know and many of you experienced, was really no exception here. If we generally look into the different research projects we have in the EU, then really stakeholder engagement increases more and more interest, gets more and more relevance actually for the different research projects, which also led to the fact that actually the tie between science and practice became much more close or stronger, more intertwined, which is basically really, really great. But it also shows that research projects really get more vulnerable to the availability and also readiness of the different stakeholders to, in the end, interact with the different researchers. And during COVID-19, and when the crisis came up, there have been different studies conducted, really studying what does it mean for specific energy and also marine systems and also related policies. But there was no study really looking specifically into the stakeholder engagement and what does this actually mean under the COVID-19 containment measures. And really this was then the starting point why we, Vera and I came together and we said, look, we have both faced here challenges. Let's have a look what this actually means also for other research projects, because we were sure that it's not only us being here affected, but that there will be a lot of impacts also by scientists and different stakeholders involved in ongoing research projects here. The three main research questions we really wanted to address is first, we need to look into what problems did COVID-19 cause for the workflow and the outcome of the current research projects. Then we were really interested how did the different scientists being responsible for the stakeholder engagement then cope with the different situation, and how do they then evaluate the alternative stakeholder activities that they had already implemented. So these are kind of the central research questions. How did we do this? We decided to set up an online survey. The survey was distributed among different EU energy research projects. Also, the European Commission was really helpful in distributing it to the different energy and marine science projects. But we used also private channels, institutional channels, really to reach out to specific projects of interest. The survey was online between June and August 2020. You can see like an example of the online survey on the right from the energy research survey here. In the end, we had 84 complete responses from 72 different energy research projects and 24 responses from marine science projects, which is like a really great number. And now today we will kind of reflect on these results and also compare them a little bit. If you look into the specific fields, like where did the projects come from? Like in energy, it was really like, diversity from researchers working in energy, social science, humanities, energy policy, and energy modeling. And also in marine science, we got like responses from different researchers working in marine ecology, fishery management, aquaculture, and also marine litter, to just provide some examples here. So what was new about the projects? We had a look into what projects actually responded to our survey, and most of the projects really started in 2018, 2019, and are supposed to end this year or next year. The majority of the respondents really answered to engage with stakeholders periodically, so not like on a regular or day-to-day basis, but really like, when there is kind of the need to reach out to different stakeholders. Generally, stakeholders that are engaged in these projects come to a large majority from the EU, from the European Union, but we also had some projects that stated that they also engage with stakeholders outside of Europe, like the US, China, and Indonesia. And last but not least, most of the energy and marine projects really engage with different stakeholder groups that are listed kind of here on the right. As you can see, like many of the research projects really engage with policymakers at different levels, like from local more to national or European level. We have different businesses and industries that are engaged, again, like really from the farmers, fishermen on the ground to really bigger energy industries and get involved here in the projects. We have like civil society organizations, but also like different research institutes that are engaged in the different projects here. Yes, some further info or information on the survey projects is that the majority really stated that stakeholder engagement plays an important role in the research projects, right? I think it's kind of natural that no research project responded that doesn't deal with stakeholders at all, because that was, of course, like the main target group that they engaged to some extent with different stakeholders. But what was quite surprising is also that, the interest really to take more co-creative approaches and to really put more in the center of the research projects, also transdisciplinary methods and approaches was really high on the agenda in general by the different research projects. So if you look now a bit closer for the motives for the stakeholder engagement in energy, you can see that still number top is like really to disseminate the research results, so to present what came out of it, but also other like motives are like to really access the communities, to identify the research needs and questions here. In fisheries, like the more transdisciplinary motives are even a little bit stronger. Like you can see also here, number one was really to identify the needs and the questions, but also to access data about the research problems and really to co-frame also the whole research process with the different stakeholders on the ground. And 2020 was really supposed to be a major year for stakeholder engagement. I think that's interesting also to understand how really the whole COVID situation and the containment measures affected the research projects, that actually given the period when the research project started, many of them really planned a lot of different activities for 2020. Yes, I think that's, hopefully gives some good information on the different research projects we kind of surveyed. And I would say now we can slowly move on to the results, and Vera is going to present them. But before, we still have a small survey we want to, to engage you also a little bit, right? It's about engagement. So let's get a bit active here before we present you what we found out.
Thank you, Diana, also for welcoming me here and having me be part of this seminar and this talk. We would like just to get a little idea of how COVID-19 influenced stakeholder engagement in your project. And I'm not crazily familiar with Zoom surveys. So I just have to figure out how this works. Anita, did you?
Sorry, I think it says Sie sind von einem anderen Gerät aus angemeldet. I think someone else has to start the survey because I'm obviously not allowed to do it. Achim, can you try it?
You would have to give me hosting rights for that. Otherwise, I don't see the option in my panel here.
Achim, do you?
Vera is now host, it says.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. See, and now I can.
Can you see Umfragen? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anything happen now?
Yes.
Great.
Can you start the survey now? No.
Yeah, it's happening.
Okay.
So I can see results coming in.
Yeah, it was live on my screen for a moment.
Strange.
So we've
Annette,
got-
you listed as a co-host, so that's probably why you didn't see it.
Great. So we've got 14 out of 18 people who voted now, and if we take Diana and I away, then that might be everyone. So can you see the results, all of you? Okay,
No.
cool. No. Okay, so the results are the following. 50% of you, so that will be 7, said that engagement is affected somewhat negatively, and 29% said it's affected very negatively. So that's with 80%, that's the large majority here. 2 people don't engage with stakeholders, and 1 person perceived engagement to be affected somewhat positively. And if we have time later on in this hour, maybe we can come back to that, because I'd be interested in what this positive development there was. Thanks for clicking anyway. And I'll go back to sharing the presentation now. If I find the button. Here we go. Okay. Are we back to the presentation?
Yes.
Great, thanks. So I would like to speak about the results that we found, and I will always show the energy results first and then compare them with the marine results. So that's the structure. First, as Diana said, we looked into what problems did COVID-19 generally cause for the workflow and outcomes of the current research projects. So when it comes to the overall impact of the pandemic on stakeholder engagement activities, in energy, the vast majority of researchers said that it was affected somewhat negatively or very negatively. 10% perceived that to not be any change in stakeholder engagement, and 4% said that it was affected somewhat positively. Only 1 out of 6 planned activities could take place in the shape that it was planned. And the projects that were most affected were those with a high priority on stakeholder engagement, which maybe is not too surprising. Looking at the marine sector, the trend is sort of similar, with the numbers being a little bit different. So about 50% of the researchers perceive it to be affected somewhat negatively. Then 17 say it's affected very negatively, but more than in energy research, the respondents said, so a quarter of the respondents said that there is no impact of the pandemic on engagement. So overall, engagement is somewhat negatively affected by the pandemic. We, of course, then also asked, why are stakeholder engagement activities affected negatively? And here I would like to look at the perceived changes in the relationship with stakeholders. So when it comes to the energy sector, the top change in the relationship with stakeholders was that it seems to be harder to reach them now. They also have less time, and the priority of the stakeholders seems to have shifted away from the project. However, also 30% of the respondents stated that stakeholders respond better to remote than to physical meetings. And a bit under 10% even felt like there was more frequent exchange with stakeholders now. The picture in the marine sciences looks rather similar, just that there is even more of a feeling that stakeholders' priorities shifted away from the project a little bit more. And some of the qualitative replies I will read out later also give a reason for that. So all in all, the priority and the time available for participation seems to have decreased. Looking at the impact on the outcomes then of stakeholder engagement, in energy, 55% of the respondents perceive there to be a somewhat negative outcome. However, also 37% says the outcomes themselves of engagement are not affected. And the numbers are sort of switched in the marine sciences. So a bit over 50% said, the formats might have changed, but the outcomes are still fine. And a third of respondents here say that the outcomes are negatively affected. Giving a bit of a voice to our respondents from the energy community, someone said, I think the COVID-19 restrictions on in-person community engagement will limit the value of stakeholder feedback. The 4 community engagement workshops created a bonding among the community that had a great value, that participants felt ownership to the results and support the implementation actions. Lacking the interactive discussions and bonding over shared outcome is a weakness of the COVID-imposed process. And a voice or two from the fisheries world say that though there are many tools available for engaging stakeholders online, it will not 100% compensate for physical meetings, which provide room for more networking and human interaction. And I think all of us would agree on, that we have now really seen the importance of things like coffee breaks for that. And remote exchange does not provide the same level of information as physical meetings. So all in all, the outcomes of engagement as well are rather negatively affected by the pandemic and the distancing restrictions. If we look at the impacts on the project workflow, so the data and workflowing within the project, then the results here look similar as well. So the main problem seemed to be delays in data flow within the project and also delays in the performance of certain work packages that rely on that data. And about 20% of respondents in both cases also said that some tasks can't be completed at all in the project. However, a similar amount of researchers said that the overall workflow is not impacted. So the main problems here seem to be delays in the data flow in particular tasks and work packages that rely on the input from stakeholders. Looking at the duration of the project in terms of the workflow and the need for extending the projects, in energy sciences, more than in marine, people said that the duration of the project is likely to be extended. So just as a bit of background, the European Commission declared the pandemic a force majeure, which means that projects can rather easily be extended at least 6 months without getting more money, but to get things done. So this seems to be more needed in energy than in marine, but it is still agreed here in both cases that deliverables are submitted later, and a similar amount in energy science, though, said that the project is going as planned, which is good. So again, deliverables are delayed and about 30% of the projects need extension. The second layer we want to look at is how did the scientists responsible for stakeholder engagement cope with the situation? So in terms of coping strategies and alternative engagement formats, the most common coping strategies were either to delay activities and wait until we can maybe possibly meet physically again, or to then change the activity formats. And mostly conferences, face-to-face interviews, and focus groups were replaced by the same formats, but virtually. And information events or face-to-face workshops were mainly replaced by webinars and online workshops. And here someone from the energy research community said that an issue here was adaptation to these formats and approaches required a learning curve for our teams. So I think we all witnessed that ourselves, that we had to get used to 3, 4, 5, 6 different online tools for meetings, and then how do you do surveys there and all that kind of issues. And from the marine sciences, somebody stated that they weren't really sure also how to implement these alternative formats. So it is planned to deliver posters and infographics through social media and also posts at the Fishers associations, but we have not decided how to do it yet. And then thirdly, how do researchers evaluate alternative activities that they have already implemented? So we did ask, what are the most suitable alternative formats in your view? And it seems to be the overall opinion that what works best is either one-on-one exchange, or if more people were involved in an event, unidirectional information provision works better. And on the other hand, the more complex and interactive a virtual event gets, the more difficult it is to really prepare it and have it and carry it out with the stakeholders. In terms of the researchers' assessment of alternative engagement methods, it seems here that in the energy sciences, webinars, interviews, and online surveys were quite popular and also well rated. And conferences and focus groups didn't work that well for researchers. In the marine sciences, the picture is a bit more mixed. So conferences are also rated well as webinars and online surveys and interviews. And more people, however, as you can see here in the red bar, more people also seem to have made negative experiences with online formats. Now, what are some benefits of online engagement? And this I would like to highlight using the voices of our respondents, because we also did pose 3 text questions. Excuse the dog barking in the background. So in the energy community, it was highlighted that online participation is convenient for stakeholders to participate easily and also at low costs. And importantly, travel costs and CO2 emissions were 0, of course. From the fishery sciences, it was highlighted that online tools are very effective and suitable for people with relevant background and skills, such as oil rig operators, port authority executives, etc. And that it's easier to reach these people during the lockdown and present services and products. There are, of course, also negative sides of engagement. And from the energy community, we got the statement that online concentration span and endurance of the people is limited. And we would all, I think, agree on that these online meetings are very tiring. And sometimes it leads to very superficial results because there is no time to deepen certain aspects. And from the marine sciences, we heard that Fisher's priorities have moved away from scientific research. The main priority of the sector now is to deal with the reduced markets and new hygiene measures. And then as well, relating to the life world of the stakeholders, many stakeholders with family obligations and childcare homeschooling during corona lockdowns and restrictions are affected in their time budgets. So there seem to be 2 aspects. One is really the technology, and the other is just the life world of the stakeholders that, just like ours, of course, changed. There's one specific point that we would like to highlight when it comes to the negatives of engagement, online engagement, and that is what we call technology-induced exclusion. So in the marine sciences, 30% of the stakeholders could not be reached via digital tools. And in energy, 24% could not be reached digitally. And in energy, the groups that were harder to reach online are mainly citizens, communities, local authorities, and locally based businesses such as farmers. And in marine, mainly small-scale fishers who are not organized in large organizations and also are often not used to using online tools. but as well policymakers who are very hard to get online, whereas in a live event, you could, for example, use those coffee breaks and networking time to exchange with policymakers. And someone from the energy research community here said that different groups of stakeholders are not very used to digital resources. And likewise, fishermen, mussel farmers, and overall people with limited digital access and skills were very hard to reach. So as practical and beneficial and time and cost saving online meetings are, we always must be aware that there is a certain group of stakeholders and a certain percentage that we will exclude by choosing these approaches. Yes, so that were our results in a nutshell. And I'm going to hand it over to Diana again now.
Thanks, Vera, for this great comparison. I think it got a lot of different insights. And of course, the key question is now, like, what does this all now mean for the future of stakeholder engagement, right? That's, I think, the important question also to see what will come like now after. I think for us it's clear that online engagement is really a good alternative, but it's not a replacement. So I think it's clear that there are a lot of advantages of engaging online that Vera has just raised, but we also saw that the majority of the respondents to our surveys stated that they will continue using engagement formats, but not to replace, but to kind of compensate and combine it together with the face-to-face engagement activities. One reason here from a energy researcher he gave was only events do not create the same kind of bond between stakeholders and projects as a face-to-face event would. And a marine science researcher stated, when stakeholders are not accustomed to digital systems, it is no alternative for reaching out to them. So there are truly like kind of some challenges that are coming with the digitalization of stakeholder engagement here. So the question is also, what are now the key takeaway messages for stakeholder engagement post-COVID-19 that we will kind of use and that are maybe hopefully also useful for you? First of all, really consider one-on-one and unidirectional online formats, as we really found out that they work best, right? Like surveys, interviews, webinars, you're kind of really on a safe side. On the other hand, of course, we all love to engage more with our stakeholders. So I think it's also clear that if you choose like more like an interactive online formats, really plan some extra time for good preparation. It is not possible just to take the same approaches you would take like offline, just online and try it out. So it needs a lot of more preparation time, usually really to create an interactive online event. Third, you should really carefully consider which stakeholders you cannot reach, as we just learned, especially when it comes to the farmers and people, local authorities. Really like don't try to not leave them behind, right? Really be inclusive and also try to engage them here. And this might mean that you really need to adapt your approach here. Do not go 100% digital. I think, that comes also from what we said before, that online formats are good to complement, but not really to replace physical events, as they will really reduce, like, first of all, the way how you can engage. It cannot create the same kind of bonds between researchers and stakeholders, and maybe even the results that you arrive at might be not as meaningful and deep as it would be otherwise in the physical events. And last but not least, really account for the COVID-19 circumstances in your research results. So there has been also quite some social science research here that we really should carefully consider and measure what environments we are now generating our research results. Because maybe the results we are arriving at now might be really different from the post or pre-COVID situation, and might be even less meaningful. So these are kind of, some of the key takeaway messages for you here. And if you're interested in our research, then of course you will can read more in the papers that have been already published in Open Research Europe and also in Marine Science. We can also share the links with you, of course, afterwards here. And I want to end with a quote from one of the energy respondents who said, similar to the climate change issue, the COVID crisis ends up in a situation where everyone is affected, like we are all sitting in the same boat. And I think this all sitting in the same boat also means that now we have to be all aware as researchers, our stakeholders, but also the research institutions, that there is really a specific situation we must really deal with. We can learn from and ideally take also kind of some new energy for new formats of stakeholder engagement, but eventually also to come back and to value really like the physical interactions in the future even more. So thanks a lot for your attention. We are looking forward to the discussion, to your feedback, to your questions, to your insights from your own research. We are happy to learn and to share and discuss with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Diana and Vera, for this presentation. And I would say we just jump right into it. If you would have a question or a comment or share your experience, just please use the raise hand button of Zoom or raise your hand physically. And I just try to keep a speakers list. Having said that, who would like to start us off with also a personal experience? Ilan, please.
First of all, thanks very much for a very well done presentation. And I think something that affects a lot of us in one way or another, not only in terms of stakeholders, but in terms of working with colleagues. Here we are on Zoom to work with each other. So we're dealing with this at several levels. One question I have, and then I have a particular instance that maybe is useful to share. The question I have is that going forward, can you imagine or have you thought about following up on this over some time? Because I think what would be interesting is sort of the transition now, maybe eventually, out of the lockdown situation into a more engaged and interactive mode. And it would be interesting to see, in some sense, how people adapt and, in a sense, what things remain now much more online focused. So let me start with the question, then I would like to offer an interesting example of getting around the problem.
Yeah, you want to start first? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, when we set up the survey last year, we did discuss that actually we should be doing the same thing like 1.5 years later, and then also maybe really look at when the different projects end and sort of individually get in touch with them and say, so how did it then, you know, at the end of the day, affect your results? So that would definitely be very interesting, sort of looking at the same projects again in time, but also as what you just raised is really interesting as well. You know, what's the legacy of COVID, of the restrictions in the sort of the general stakeholder engagement arena? Yeah, that's a very good point.
Thank you. The comment I wanted to make, I mean, just sort of my experience in Japan was that I was working with small rural communities with Norio Okada, former fellow at IASS, and several colleagues there. And I fortunately last spring was able to engage in 3 research meetings on site. And then we tried to follow up remotely. And for the reasons that some people pointed out, some of the people involved either had poor local connections. I mean, they had connections, but it was inadequate for really a large group Zoom or whatever, or they were simply unfamiliar with it and it was difficult to get them. But what it did do, the in-person things were critical then, as many people I think have noted, in not only in the engagement at the time, but in laying the groundwork for following up, that people were interested even in a one-to-one or in future meetings. And I think that my experience was that didn't come out of purely online engagement. There wasn't the degree of engagement, perhaps, and particularly with people who are not used to using it. Anyway. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we actually, in fact, I mean, it's sort of different, but not. We started a research project, the other one that I work in, Future Mars. We started it last September, and it's got 32 partners from 15 countries, and we started it online. We never met, and we never had this kickoff where you have beer together in the evening, etc. And it does make a huge difference in terms of the cohesion within the project. So yeah.
Thanks. I got Pia and then Sebastian on my list. Pia, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting presentations and great insights. So Sebastian has put in the chat that he'd actually wanted to push both buttons, that it sort of the pandemic, apologies. Okay, so that the pandemic affects the stakeholder engagement both negatively and positively. So on the plus side, my experience was that although we had to rearrange and sort of totally reshuffle our stakeholder engagement processes in one of our projects, that's the recipes project, which is one work package deals exclusively with stakeholder engagement, and it really put a wrench in the works of the project. And we even sort of had a cost neutral extension of the project by 6 months. But then on the plus side, we had to look for other methodological ways, like of aiming for the same kind of content with different means. So there's also sort of a reconfiguration of stakeholder engagement taking place, and sort of a mapping of different opportunities. So in one way, it's we were really stuck. In another way, it was also new territory, and sort of we were given a complete sort of blank canvas where we could sort of explore new options. So does that resonate with your experiences, or sort of is that a single one with me? Thanks.
Thanks, Pia, for sharing the experience. Yeah, I think totally, right? That's also why we put there are totally benefits, right, to the whole COVID situation, that you really got experimental, that you have to go you have to think outside of your box. You really have to look for new approaches. So I think such a crisis can always be an opportunity, right? Really to rethink what you have always done, because we know ourselves, often you go back to the same methods and use them over and over again. So I think there are truly a lot of opportunities on the one hand, and I think that's also relates to the fact that many people put there are also some positive aspects here related to that, and also the engagement with stakeholders. I mean, we truly had that, specifically also policymakers, actually for them it's often better, they have or for other state decision makers that are really limited in time, that they might respond also really better to this online activities, because they say, I rather spend 1 hour online and I don't need to travel anywhere. So it might be really also easier to reach out to specific stakeholder groups online instead of for physical events. But on the other side, you have a lot of downsides also when it really comes to the deepness of engagement that is actually possible. So I can totally mirror that there are the two sides effect, and was a bit unfair maybe to allow only for one answer, but but that's the way. So yeah, totally, it's not only one coin. Yeah, Vera, you can add.
Yeah, just briefly from my side as well, I absolutely agree, and I also rewrote 2 engagement strategies because they didn't apply any longer. And so in the 2 projects I work in, I do run the work packages, sort of coordinate engagement with all the partners who do the engagement. So there was a lot of reconfiguring and looking at the local situation and what makes sense there. And at the start of the project I just mentioned earlier, we wanted to do some sort of event with higher level policymakers and really get their input early on in the project. And we pardon my language, we screwed that up pretty well, because we did it online, and we did it with a mural where they should then put things, and it was all nice and interactive. But it turned out that it was way too complex for like a 1.5 hour sort of thing, and then they all just left halfway through it, you know, and we were sitting there making stupid faces. So that was, yeah, we did indeed look for new methods, and sometimes it doesn't work so well. So yeah, it is a learning curve, definitely.
Thanks. I now got Sebastian on my list, please.
Yes, thanks a lot. Really exciting presentation. I, of course, very much liked also that there was so much sort of review also of marine project. That was really exciting to see, and bringing this together with learning from energy. Very, very well done. So thanks for that. I don't really want to, a lot has been said already in the discussion that I wanted to raise and just report on similar experience. So I will keep it very short, but I also wanted to ask, basically relating to this aspect of learning throughout the pandemic. And this is something that we also, you know, experienced quite strongly, that we had this learning curve, and that also we basically developed almost like new formats that interestingly we wouldn't have not done before. I mean, it would have been possible technically, but we somehow needed this pandemic to be forced to develop this. And so is there something like you planning to do in this research to also see how perhaps projects are adapting or implementing, or if even new projects are set up, if they take on board such learnings? I think this could be really interesting. I mean, I think it comes as no surprise if a pandemic kicks in, and then you have your project and you have planned physical meeting, kicks off, etc., that this, you know, catches you by surprise. But if you're sort of aware of it, and it makes your project perhaps more resilient in the future by being flexible and learning from that, and I think that could be really interesting also to look up in the follow-up of your already quite very exciting research.
Thanks a lot. Yes, really great suggestions. Also to look at the new projects, not only in the ones that are going to be finished soon, right? How they look back on what kind of happened, but also what it means like for the ones that are kind of starting now, how they kind of really deal with the whole situation. Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's still like, as Vera said, we said like we should do it, like do another survey, like kind of 1.5 years after, maybe end of the year, maybe next year. So it's still like, you know, as we know in research, there are always time constraints, and of course this whole excursion was really great, but it was not foreseen, right? It was not accounted for, so it was kind of some extra time. We really said we have to invest here because we saw like really that's great. There's a great opportunity to look into it. But yeah, there is much more to take out, like also the learnings for the future of stakeholder engagement here. So definitely for that reason, it would be really great like to do actually another survey and to get some more insights, you know, also when different formats kind of work, also in regard again to look into like, is it really co-creation, and what do the co-creative projects do, what do others do that only disseminate, you know, results to the different stakeholders? Because I think from the nature of the projects there are a lot of like differences also with whom you're engaging, right? Like, is it like, you know, high level decision makers, or is it really the local people and the fishermen and other farmers in the local region? So there are a lot of different, you know, things to consider. So it would be definitely interesting to have a closer look and to, yeah, get some more insights into the strategies that the different teams have set up and developed, and to take some additional learnings from them. Yeah.
Thanks. We still have some time left, and Vera wanted to come in.
Yeah, just an aspect that I sort of got to already when I presented the slides, but from all the discussions with my colleagues now and whatnot, I think what this has really shown us as well is how immensely we underestimated the importance of coffee breaks at conferences and, you know, workshops and everything. Because well, in Future Maris, in the other project I work in, we do have an entire work package dedicated on policy engagement, because it's just a different sort of arena. It's, you know, a different level, different mechanisms at play in the policy world. And the colleague leading this work package, she's quite desperate, because she says without physical meetings, it's basically just impossible to do anything there, because you can't, you know, chat about your project with anyone in any coffee breaks, and policymakers tend to just not be available for so many online meetings and everything. So I mean, even there are, like, at the more local level, sort of technology-based issues such as bad internet connectivity, people just not being as used to, you know, working online, living online as we are, but also in higher level spheres, just very different kinds of issues. And sorry, phone ringing, hanging up. Yeah. So the importance of this informal sort of human exchange aspect of conferences and workshops and whatnot, I think has become very clear in this time as well.
And maybe just to add to what you just said, Vera, is also that, I mean, we even got a response that, you know, like not only the priority, like decrease of the different stakeholders to be involved in the project, but also that some stakeholders kind of even decided maybe to go off the project and not to participate anymore, because they said this physical interaction in these meetings were also one of the main motivations to join, like, you know, the different research projects in the first place. So this just underlines how important and how much, you know, the different stakeholders also value this exchange that we would usually provide, not only with us, but also between the different stakeholders, actually, like, you know, between policymakers and businesses, because they don't talk on a day-to-day basis. And often this research and innovations projects, they are a good place that they have also time to meet and to exchange, like, beyond even the project. And I also wonder, like, what does it do with, like, with regard to the bonds and also trust, right? Because usually, like, also what we produce in research projects, I mean, it's not natural that, you know, whoever decision and policymaker just takes what we are providing. So they, of course, have to trust us. They have to understand what we are doing and really to say, okay, these results are great. We know the process, we have been involved. And that's why we kind of rely also on the results that are produced within. So I also wonder how this kind of also changed. So it would be also interesting, not only actually to survey, even to go a bit further, not only to survey the researchers, but also the different stakeholders and engage to understand what did it make with them, right? And also how did it change the relation to the different research projects here. But yeah, maybe then we need to get some additional forces on board here to support us with this next level of survey. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. And I got then Pia and then Ilan on my list. Pia, please.
Right, just one more thing. So we are now talking about stakeholder engagement. So in another sort of activity, we also had a sort of like a deliberative process with citizens, like randomly selected citizens. And that process that was built around like scenario building and then a deliberation and sort of an assessment of those scenarios. So that went surprisingly well because people really had sort of like an option of scenarios, and then they felt very free in chatting about those scenarios, those outcomes, and were also like very outspoken in their personal opinions of their assessments of those scenarios. With the policy workshop and where we use Mural, that went totally down the drain because that they decided to disregard Mural and said, no, this is not working for us. And it was basically just an information download from their side. So there might be this added twist with the citizen engagement, and when you're looking at sort of laypersons basically, and when they have sort of a quantitative input that they can deliberate on. So that would be really, really interesting to sort of investigate in the future how that goes. Thanks.
Okay, then Ilan, please.
Just very briefly, I wanted to follow up in a sense from a comment earlier that I made. I've had the experience, and that is to some degree the contrast between being in the US and being in Japan, which is that the way that people are willing to interact also is very much dictated, or at least influenced strongly, by the environment around and how they see the COVID crisis for them. So it was not difficult to engage in Japan until the government stepped in and said it's an emergency and you can't travel to a different prefecture and so forth. That shut things down. But before that, it was not a problem. People normally wore masks. It was like, yeah, of course. In the US, I'm sorry to say, that is not the case. And the result is that there is a differential, if you will, between different people, even on political levels, as to who will engage in a in-person versus an online meeting. So there are some interesting differences, and that's also why I suggested that it would be interesting over the next couple of years, basically, to follow how this develops in terms of the stakeholder engagement approaches as the situation with the COVID itself changes and people respond differently. Thanks.
Thanks. We have a couple of minutes left. Does anyone else would like to share experiences or comments? I've also seen that in the chat, new connections are made. Sebastian, please.
Thanks, Achim. Given we have a little bit of time, I just also wanted to highlight a positive aspect that we really came across, and that's, I mentioned this already, the development of very targeted and new formats. And what we found out that works really well is online is when you can work on the basis of existing networks, right? So if you have existing projects, if you have even high-level policymaker, I think are very easy to engage with when you know them, when you know your institution, when they are somehow familiar with a topic, and in such a situation, I think it's this COVID world even helped us quite a lot to, even at short notice, to bring together a really excellent group of people, because everybody was stuck at home, and we were sometimes quite surprised to have really, capacities in our field accepting like a week in advance, almost like random invitations, right? Absolutely unthinkable under normal conditions. And so that's, I think, a very, very positive experience. And also we work a lot with ocean governance actors in Africa. And sometimes we also have the feeling that the real experts were on the call, not the ones who are their head of unit or so, who wants to travel and to get the travel allowance, but the ones who are really able, to contribute substance. So there are, some random experiences that are very positive. But then on the other hand, and that I think reflects, Vera, what you said, I mean, starting off a project, having a kickoff only virtually, etc. I think that's a nightmare, and that's very difficult, I think, very, very well to understand.
Maybe just to ask back, Sebastian, would you say that's like still true today? Like, because what we also a little bit found was like the people got a bit bored by this online events, and there might be at the beginning like a high willingness to join, but now we might have reached like already the point where people are also a bit more hesitate because it got so much online, and now everyone wants to go offline again. So that this might have been like a momentum rather like at the beginning, but might be not true anymore. Like.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's also, I think, an interesting experience. And we experience exactly the same and are very, very cautious. I mean, we're organizing online events exactly for that reason. But what, again, sort of building on existing networks, I think it works when even there, only if it's very targeted. For example, we had in a project that my colleague Nicole Wiedrich has run, where we have developed a report on regional approaches for marine litter, and the report was almost done. We had the draft ready, and then we had a like 1.5 hour very intensive review workshop with stakeholders from basically all marine regions globally, that we know from our networks, and that they have read the report and provided feedback, and that was very productive. But that's something we would not have done in the past. I don't know why. I mean, perhaps it needed this input. But if it's so targeted and very, also work output oriented, I think you can reach people very well still in this situation. But people are tired when it's just about, having just another panel discussion online, or that's something that I think doesn't work really anymore. Because then you're right, the coffee breaks are missing afterwards.
Okay, Angela, please.
Yeah, I wanted to share something because we just stopped. I mean, we finished the Potsdam Summer School 2021 as a digital format, which was run for 2 weeks with 46 people across so many time zones that we had to spend 15 hours. So yes, the coffee breaks were missed very much though. There was another interesting and positive fact was that we got people on board from Africa, which we normally don't do because they can't afford the travel. But this time traveling was not a problem. So we got a completely different mix of people, lots of people from the Southern Hemisphere, which we normally don't get so much. And believe it or not, there was not a single person from the US, so which normally is the fact. So there's some change here, and it gives us the alternative. And I also think for future events, a hybrid where we get speakers from somewhere, wherever they are, can come into an event without traveling, and but the audience is in the same room, so you have the interaction with the audience, and also the input from wherever the person is you want to give input to. So I think in future there is a chance to have interesting workshops or interesting conferences where you can make use of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that was also one of the conclusions, like, we raised in the papers that likely it will be like a hybrid mode or like a combination, right, of online and offline that will bring like the true value here. So we have now the openness of the people to engage also online. And if you do it nicely, I think it can really lead also to a more diverse group to be engaged, as it just nicely showed, right? But also like to have in mind, maybe there must be some possibilities to get funding also for bringing like people, rather from low income countries to come to us and to join also our summer school. So I think that sounds also something like we have to think about to make this really happen, right? I think that would be also very nice.
And I'm happy to share, if you need any tools to engage with it in engagement, I have now a tool set of lots of things how you can engage without drinking coffee. So I'm happy to share that.
Cool. Yeah, that would be great. I think that would be great to see like what you now gathered and to bring it together. I think that's also like for all the institutes now very, very useful, right? And we can maybe also engage again and see what kind of broader learnings or how we can present it. Maybe we can also think about it like how to make this really, I mean, in the papers it might get like sometimes a little bit lost, and I think today was a nice chance, right, to really get the results out, and also like some other blogs, like we just have published also like a small blog article, but I think it needs still much more discussion and could be also something like really growing together, right, to bring the different insights there and to make it really accessible and useful for different teams engaging with stakeholders. I think it would be very nice.
Yeah, we are coming to a close of today's Tuesday talk, but still I would like to ask you to Diana, Vera, do you have any final words? I mean, Diana, you already said something, but do you want to add something on top or so? Or Vera, do you would like to add something?
I would just like to use the opportunity to thank you for inviting me to this talk from a different niche of the academia. So thanks for having me, and also for the good discussion. I think that's my final words.
Okay.
Yes, thanks everyone for the insights. That's very, very great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you also from my side for your presentation and for the very interesting discussion. I hope this goes on, this research and this work to some degree. And with this, we conclude today's Tuesday talk. And I wish you all, wherever you are and whenever you are, a nice afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.